Hi, this is Yvon Prehn, and I would like to talk to you about what church secretaries wish their pastors knew about church communication. Let me just say, as part of an introduction, that I'm sharing this not only as someone who teaches church secretaries and communicators how to do their jobs, but also as someone who does it on a weekly basis for many years, and I still do all of the church communication, secretarial work, all of those sorts of things for my husband, who is a bivocational pastor. So the things that I'm talking about, I very much experience, and I just wanted you to know that before I get started. So let's get started. The strategic importance, number one, is what a lot of us would really like our pastors to know. We are involved in the church daily in spiritual warfare. We are literally fighting for the eternal souls of people. The communications work that we do, it is literally the communication center for the spiritual warfare in the church, and as such, it's incredibly important, and that really needs to be acknowledged. The church office has a vital part to play in it, and one of the things, too, in realizing this is we need to remember that Satan is the accuser of the brethren. That's how he's always going to attack us, and we just can't let him succeed. Our best attitude is a real biblical attitude and prayer together, realizing that we're in this battle together, praying together, and being at peace with each other. Also, too, church secretaries and those of us that work in church communications, we really need the right tools to get the job done. That means an adequate, doesn't have to be cutting edge, but an adequate computer. Computer prices have dropped tremendously over the last few years. Setups that used to cost thousands of dollars are now in the low hundreds of dollars. So there's really, in many instances, no reason not to have a good system. One of the most important things in the computer is that it has enough RAM. This is what's known as random access memory, and you really need today 4 or more gigabytes to do it, to do a good job, and even more if you have a lot of real media demands, if you're doing video editing and this sort of thing. The reason is the RAM is the working memory of your computer, and all of the images, the things that you work on, they all have to fit into the RAM. A number of churches have older computers that maybe, if they're lucky, have only 1 or 2 gigabytes of RAM. And this is just not enough. You can't do a good job with that. So your computer has to have enough RAM. Another thing that is absolutely essential today is high-speed internet access. This is not a luxury for doing communications work in the church. So many resources, training, all sorts of things like that are available online. You could get high-speed internet access at your church for less than what it would, for an entire year probably, for less than what it would cost to give the church secretary one class that she had to take at a community college or something like that. So it's really an absolutely essential tool. You can get free clip art, free images, so many resources for no cost at all if you have access to the internet. So this is essential. A good desktop laser printer, not an inkjet. Inkjets just go through ink so quickly, and even color lasers have dropped down tremendously in price. A laser printer in the long term costs much, much less to use and is absolutely essential. You also need, of course, good production machines or machines. What I mean by this is, of course, you need a really good copier, but in some of your churches you might want to also look at a digital duplicator again, where you can print lots and lots of things at a high speed and for a low cost. Also, too, I encourage you, if you need to outsource, to look at some of the resources that are online. Nowadays, you don't have to go to the fancy companies and stuff like that. There are many companies. Vistaprint happens to be one that I've used. I've done a number of things for my husband with this, and we've just been thrilled with the results. Very inexpensive, but if you want the high gloss, lots and lots of things, say postcards or business cards or something like that, a company like Vistaprint is a wonderful way to go. So these are just very basic tools. You can't expect great resources without the right tools. So get us the right tools. Next, communication work requires the right software. Word processing software alone doesn't really do a very good layout. On the high end, the Adobe Creative Suite might be overkill. It's very expensive. Hard to learn. You could do it, but what I strongly recommend for churches is Microsoft Publisher. There are great templates in the church office that the church secretary can create, say, an overall template for different ministries in the church. People in the ministries can do things month by month, send it back to the church. It can be printed there. It's really flexible. You can do so much with it. In the PDF of the handouts that go with this, this video, I will have this link. But on my website, I have a whole little booklet I put together that really shows you why and how Microsoft Publisher is really the most useful thing for your churches. And I strongly encourage you to look at it. For those of you that haven't used it in years, it has increased so much in what it can do. I do all the banners for my websites, my book covers, all of the publications that you see online, the editable templates, all of these sorts of things, very high-end communications, all are done with Publisher. It's cheap, it's easy to learn. Also, church secretaries, people doing communications work, need software training. A lot of softwares today say, oh, it's intuitive to use. No software is intuitive to use. Trust me. We will always stumble along and do the best we can, but real training is needed. And lynda.com here, that's how I've gotten training on so many things. Again, this is another reason why you need the high-speed internet access. Only $25 a month. You can take unlimited classes. They're broken into little bitty chunks that you learn a little bit, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Absolutely fantastic, so useful, and I cannot stress enough how important that is. Also, because you really need more than just the nuts and bolts of how to use the software, I've created my website, Effective Church Communications. This is really essential for you because in addition to just knowing how to do the software, you need to know the spiritual reasons why you're doing the communications work that you do. For example, Mother's Day is not too far away as I create this video, and I've put together another video on the website that shows how you can really use Mother's Day as an evangelism tool, and it talks about really the often missed opportunities and how it can also be a time for great spiritual growth. Always for the different holidays, events, things like that. I have very short, this is only 11-minute video that you can watch together with your church secretary communicator, and it'll really give you a vision for why you're doing the communications and the work that you're doing. So the spiritual aspects are very important. Also, just in practical ways, you need church-specific, Christian-specific resources. Again, for Mother's Day, I have this One Mother's Prayer that's actually it's been the most downloaded thing that I've had in all of my ministry, where it shows how powerful a mother's prayers can be. The training videos, I've talked about these templates, PDFs. The website has hundreds of these that you can simply download, put in your own information. If you don't want to edit them in Microsoft Publisher, I have PDF versions that right on the back, you can personalize them, print them off, you're ready to go. So you need this kind of thing also to really equip your church secretary, your church communicator. Also, once they have all the tools, you need to understand how church communication works. Now, what's really important for leaders here is you don't have to know how to do it, but you need to understand how it's done. Desktop publishing, any kind of internet work is so complex. It's extremely difficult, much harder than it seems like it's going to be. Also, it needs to be done in sequential order. yes, we're not laying things out the same way we used to with pay stub and all that, but if you don't give us the stuff that we need before we start laying out a web page or a brochure or whatever it is, it's really, really hard. So you need to understand that. And also, last-minute changes are very hard to make. Granted, it's not as difficult as when you had to pour hot lead into typesetting, but I've found that so many church leaders think that, they've kind of bought into this, changes are so easy to make. Well, yeah, but they can be much more difficult than it appears. So please realize this. Now, let me explain what I mean in more detail. This is really important. Some things can look very easy to do, but in reality, they're really hard. Making changes, looking stuff up, all of that sort of thing. I'll never forget one time my husband wanted an illustration from the internet on something that he was going to be doing, and he gave me the topic. And then he's just standing there. And I said, don't you have things to do? And he said, well, get it for me. Get it for me right now. And I said, oh, okay. So I said, why don't you sit here a minute and I'll look it up for you, because it was a little bit complicated. Well, after about 10 minutes, because internet searches, you look somewhere, you have to check something out. It's not always exactly what you want. You try something else back and forth. He sort of decided that, I could get back to him after I found it. He had just heard that, you can find sermon illustrations just really easily on the web. And so he thought somehow that it would, just plug it in and I'd have it. And it just doesn't work that way. So now when he needs me to look up something, he'll say, well, he'll give me something and then he'll give me time to do it. I'll never forget, too, one person who was working on church communications. This happened to be a gentleman. His pastor came to him and said, I need just these little changes made here on this publication that you're getting ready to put together. And the person was very wise, because he'd been through this numerous times, and he said, well, since it's just a few little changes, why don't you just sit here beside me, and you can see how I do this. The pastor said, oh, sure, I've got a few minutes. He said about an hour later, pastor had a whole new sense of what just some little changes meant. So I'm not saying this to be icky or difficult or anything like that, but please do take the time to watch and understand what it takes to do things. One other area I must mention is on creating slides for PowerPoint. Something on PowerPoint might be over in 5 seconds, less than that. But it might take hours to literally find the right image, to do some transitions, things like that. So please be sensitive of it. Have an idea of what you're asking for. And just ask me, say, how long will this take? This seems easy to me. Is it in reality? That sort of thing will go a really long way. Remember, too, I'm not perfect. I'm going to mess up on some stuff. I won't find what you like, or maybe won't get it right the first time around. And I'm not magic. Just be aware of those sorts of things. And even though we have these extraordinary tools, we all still mess up. We do need to come to some agreements, and this is sometimes very, very hard for church secretaries to talk about with an authority figure, but we need to agree on publication guidelines. What is necessary in different areas, on the bulletin or on postcards? Does the church office really have to look over every single little flyer that the children's ministry sends out to remind kids what to bring on Sunday? Just what are the guidelines? By the way, on my website, I do have additional articles and things on teamwork and perfectionism in the church, and I really encourage you to read some of those. We do need to agree on deadlines, and please, please, please stick with them. I try to work my hardest and do the kind of work that you want and need, but if deadlines are just suggestions and not real deadlines, that makes for a lot of hardship. Once agreed upon on deadlines and things like that, I need you to back me up. Pastors, please back up your secretaries. If a board member or a committee head is always late on their stuff and you let it slide, you are the one that really needs to say no. Mary has set this deadline, and I'm backing her on it. I'm sorry you didn't get it in this month on time. We'll make copies. We'll put it on the bulletin board. We'll have some in the church office. But if she states a deadline, it holds. That will bring about more peace and joy in the church office than you can imagine. Also, please help recruiting and provide training for volunteers. It's really hard sometimes to get people to help in communications, but if the pastor is proactive and announces things from the pulpit, that can be very, very helpful. Do you have a procedure in place when there are problems or disagreements or things like that? If we know ahead of time how we're going to handle difficult times, it will make it so much easier. And finally, a few things that would be really, really nice, and I'm speaking to all of you pastors because your church secretaries will never probably say this to you: pay them decently. Good, skilled communicators with the computer today command a good wage in the market. Many of the people that work in the church do it out of a love for the Lord and a dedication to the church, but you shouldn't take advantage of this. Recognize that they are professional, pay them well, be very aware of their situation, whether if they need health care and benefits and things like this. It is very unkind to have their hours just below what they need for that to apply. In James, where it talks about taking care of the widows and orphans as being a real priority in the church, many women who work in the church, and it is primarily women, although there are a number of gentlemen who need to be paid well also, but for the ladies, there are many single women, many widows. Do not take advantage of them. The Lord says you are to care for them, and this is something that it's kind of one of those unspoken things in the church, but this is something that really needs to be evaluated. Protect your church communicators yourself, your secretaries against self-appointed communication critics in the church. There will always be people who will pick at everything. And you need to intervene. You need to run interference. Often in the church, people have no help. They have no proofers. They're working under literally impossible deadlines. And typos are going to happen. And when that happens, you can say something like, oh, you know, Betty, that was just great that you found it. But, you know, Mary, our church secretary, she works so hard. And you know, number one, I'd love to have you pray for it. Number two, boy, if you could come into the church office on Thursday afternoon and proof things, we'd really appreciate that. So, you know, however you want to do it, but be a protector in that. Please provide encouragement. What we do is really hard, and church secretaries are told not to complain, not to anything, but an encouraging word is just really needed and greatly appreciated. Pray for your secretary, for the people that do the communications work. In so many churches, there are overall prayers for the staff and the missionaries and all that sort of thing, and that's very, very important, and it should be. But pray consistently for your secretaries and the people that do the communications work. They truly are holding down an incredibly critical job and need prayers. And, of course, occasional chocolates and lattes are greatly preferred. My husband knows that nothing helps me meet a good deadline, or I shouldn't say a good deadline, an unrealistic deadline more than a grande, non-fat latte from Starbucks. That's my treat of choice. All of your secretaries have different ones. I particularly with chocolates like Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Those are hard to beat, but those are my preferences. If you don't know immediately what your church secretary likes, you need to find that out and treat her or him. Again, there are, I know, numerous gentlemen that are doing this wonderful job, and encourage them in that way. And finally, too, I created Effective Church Communications to help church secretaries, people doing communications work in the church, and to help you as a pastor with strategy and all those sorts of things. So please give your secretary, your communication team, yourself the gift of membership in this site. I've made it very, very reasonable, $9.99 a month or $99 a year, and it will equip and encourage all of you to do your very, very best. Now that I've told you what your secretary wouldn't probably tell you, please consider doing it. And may the Lord bless all of you richly as you do communications work and your church work overall for our Lord.